listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
What's up, and welcome to the final Straight to Video podcast for 2022. It's been an awesome year for this show with almost 70 new episodes with a bunch of amazing guests, and I want to thank you all for continuing to listen and showing such brilliant support. Today though, I wanted to end with a bang and finally tied down a guest who we've been looking at setting up a chat with for, when I checked back on emails, it was almost 18 months, but we did it, and he has a pretty rock solid excuse for not being able to fit it into his schedule. So today for our special year-end Christmas show, I'm speaking to writer, director, hair metal fan and all-round horror legend Mr. Corin Hardy. This fella has a resume which will blow your mind, from being known for such films as The Hallow and The Nun, along with for some time being tied to the Crow reboot, and most recently he's been manning the director helm of the hugely successful Sky TV series Gangs of London, which has just seen season 2 released to amazing reviews. Now, if you are to dig even further under the surface, then Corin has directed music videos for the likes of Keane and their epic Somewhere Only We Know video, the Prodigy's Warriors Dance, the Horrible Crow's Hurricane video, and Ollie Mayer's Heart Skips a Beat, which if you watch this super fun video, you may well recognise Corin's older brother, friend to this show, and all-round awesome drummer and cool dude, Mr. Robin Guy. So that's what everyone knows Corin for, but on this podcast, I wanted to go way back and see what put him on this path and amazing career, as I know he has 80s horror running through his veins, still has a love of old VHS tapes, and more importantly loves Poison, Skid Row and Faster Pussycat, which makes him pretty much the perfect guest for this show. We chat about the films that had a massive effect on him as a kid, and safe to say he picked some outright doozies, and we basically had a great time talking horror and air metal, so I hope you enjoy it too. As always, this episode of the show is proudly presented to you in association with Affinity Photo, an incredible piece of photo editing software which I've been using for graphic design the past couple of years, and it's used to create the podcast episode artwork you see each week, and it's an extremely affordable alternative to all the other programs on the market. Now is a great time to get on board with Affinity Photo and also Affinity Designer and Publisher, as they've announced a brand new version 2 platform with some amazing price discounts, so check them out at affinity.serif.com. Okay, let's close out the year with a good one. If you want to learn more about Corin's career, then check out his website, corinhardy.com, and tune into the new season of Gangs of London, which is out now on Sky. But right now, sit back and please enjoy my straight-to-video talk with Corin Hardy.
Hello.
How's it going, mate?
All right, how are you?
Yeah, good. We did it.
So it's taken so long.
Mate, I'm stoked that we got to do this, and I appreciate you taking some time. I know how busy you've been.
Yeah, no worries. So it's probably taken about a year and a half or something.
Congratulations on Gangs of London. Second season's just landed. How's the response been so far, or do you kind of get it finished then just walk away?
No, it's been a real complete immersion in creating the show over the last. It's actually been it's been 4 years for me, because I started in around November 2018.
Mate.
19, 20, 21, 22. So, yeah, I thought I was going to go on and do an episode with Gareth Evans, and then ended up doing 2, then 3, then doing the final episode. And then by the time I'd sort of finished work on the first season, we got the green light on the second, and they asked me to take charge of that. So I finished it not that long ago, and then have just been doing a lot of press. And it's finally out. It's all out on Sky and on AMC and around the world. And it's got a really good response. So I feel kind of relieved that all the work has been well received.
Yeah. And a third season's been greenlit, right?
And there's a third season. So that's the best sort of compliment in a way, that I didn't fuck it up.
Is that suddenly exhausting though? It's like, wow, I've just done this. Now we're already...
That's the strange thing, actually. The minute you get the show out, literally the second season has been flat out 2.5 years going through, working through that pandemic with everything that takes, and a super ambitious show. Put everything into it, up until the final minute of, it getting taken away and put on the networks. And then it comes out on Sky. It came out as a whole. You can binge all of it. And then you get people sort of 9 hours later going, yeah, binged it, loved it, went season 3. But on the same day that it's released, and I haven't even sat and watched the final thing on TV.
You're like, I need a nap first. But it's going to be out on, is it DVD and Blu-ray before Christmas?
Yeah, it comes out, I think, on the 19th on a nice sort of double season box set, some nice cinematic art done by Colm, who's called Creepy Duck Art on Twitter, Instagram, and he's specializes in alternative movie posters. Did the poster for the recent last Scream movie, and he's done one for Barbarian. He's done a number of posters. I've got to know him. He's a lover of all the things we love, particularly kind of 80s horror movies. Got to know him. He did me one for The Nun and one for the Hallow, and when it came to doing a sort of special box set art for Gangs of London, I thought it'd be great to see what he'd do. So he's done a sort of almost slightly Star Wars vibe, kind of Drew Struzan-y kind of artwork for Gangs of London, Blu-ray and DVD.
Awesome stuff. I mean, he was just like making a name for yourself within like the horror supernatural movie community with the Hallow and the Nun. For a while you was tied with the Crow reboot. Then all of a sudden land the director role in Gangs of London. I guess that's a constant reminder of how unpredictable this choice of career path you chose can be. It's like, wow.
I'm definitely, a die-hard horror lover and happy to sort of sit in that genre and make movies. And then obviously within horror, there's plenty of subgenres and, some I'm more fond of than others. But I also didn't want to get, as a filmmaker, as a storyteller and a lover of all sorts of different types of cinema, you don't really want to get pigeonholed. I've got no problem with being known for horror. But when I was doing The Crow, for instance, it was a perfect kind of, almost multi-genre, because The Crow is kind of a horror movie and it's an action movie and it's a poetic, romantic, tragic story. So it felt like a good sort of step. And when that didn't happen, Gangs of London was in a way the most scary to take on. Because Gareth Evans was involved, it felt like that's what allowed me to imagine that I could bring something that I love into a kind of grounded crime show. But it was, when I read it, it was really kind of like super deep, complex plot with tons of characters and loads of backstories and intertwining relationships, tons of dialogue. And it was a TV show. And, TV's changed a lot over the last 10 years or so with shows like Breaking Bad and Sopranos and Game of Thrones and stuff like that. So I knew it's reached a point of cinema, but I was waiting to sort of put my stamp on what my TV show would be. And then Gangs of London came along and it wasn't the thing which I, had created myself initially. So it felt like kind of diving into the unknown a lot, quite a sort of new challenge, but it's been really like rewarding to try out a different genre and work in it and bring horror into it and Western into it and martial arts into it and action movies and Korean revenge movies and, blend it all together to make something that we love. I've sort of learned a lot through working on the show. So now I'm looking forward to taking that back into my next horror movie.
Superb. So is there some horror stuff always clawing its way in the back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I've got a number of projects been bubbling for a while.
Awesome, man. I mean, are you a fan of like Black Mirror and stuff like that? Saying how much like TV's changed over the years, like something like Black Mirror came along. I mean, I think that's over 10 years old now.
Yeah.
It's like a mini movie every time, but it's for TV. It's crazy.
That sort of thing, it's like the modern creep show, isn't it? Like, it's really inspiring that they can have completely separate stories and genres and sci-fi and horror, and Black Mirror is incredible. I was actually thinking of it last night. I was driving back at night and I needed some music that was calm. I had my daughters in the back seat and I was trying to remember the name of the episode of Black Mirror, which has got an incredible soundtrack.
My favourite episode is the San Junipero one.
That's the one. So I love that episode. It's stuck with me. I keep thinking about it. And that soundtrack is incredible as well.
We're a similar age. I think we're just about a year apart. So like grew up during such an amazing time for both film, but particularly horror. I think you went in like old school right from the start though, after seeing the original King Kong when you were 5. Not the 1976 Jeff Bridges version, but the black and white one, right?
Yeah, I can remember it pretty vividly. We used to go on family holidays to Cornwall and my grandparents lived in Dorset and my mum and dad would always stop for a day or two in Dorset and we'd stay at my grandparents' house. And I remember not feeling well and getting put to bed in my grandmother's bed upstairs, and it had this small black and white television at the end of the bed, and the bed was made of yak hair, weirdly, this hairy bed. It was like a kind of being on the back of a Yeti, And I remember kind of turning on the TV and watching whatever was on, like you did when you were a kid and you didn't know what was on, and it was King Kong, but I didn't really know that, and I started watching it and I remember just being like drawn in the adventure part and then terrified of this creature, and then by the end of it I remember like weeping weeping on a jack-haired bed, and something had changed in me. And it was like having seen a monster that I thought was real, and then also being really moved by it because you actually kind of was in love with it. And so, yeah, that was like one of the first. But I think that along with other Ray Harryhausen movies, I didn't really see horror until I was a little bit older, like 12. But I'd seen King Kong, and then every Christmas you'd see on Boxing Day, there was always...
I was just about to say, it was usually Boxing Day afternoon.
Boxing Day, Jason and the Argonauts. And actually, I remember Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was one of my also earliest and favourites. And that was the same thing. It was just like, at the time, it felt absolutely terrifying, like this going down in a diving bell. And it's so sort of vivid to me, going down and being like, wow, they're in a diving bell underwater, and then there's these creatures outside, and then seeing this monster and this eye and all that. No, and then I remember seeing, I think it was my cousin's 9th birthday, they rented a VHS player. Do you remember that time before you owned them and you would rent one for like a special occasion?
Yeah.
And it was Jamie, my cousin's birthday. It was his 9th. They rented out, what a cool double bill, Raiders of the Lost Ark and Clash of the Titans. And I remember one of them had the trailer for Day of the Dead, George Romero's Day of the Dead on it, which also absolutely traumatized me when all the hands pushed through the wall. In fact, I was sort of terrified of Clash of the Titans, Calabos, and, you know, the harpies and the kind of blood and Medusa. And I was terrified of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but thrilled by both immensely, you know, the whole Nazi melting at the end. I was sort of like, never seen anything like this. So I was kind of a fan more of like fantastic films.
Was you able to kind of like seeing like King Kong back in the day, then seeing like Clash of the Titans and the effects using them, was you able to like piece it together? Like, oh, this is like the same technique that's been used.
I don't think I was conscious of it. I think it was just a thing, which was looking back, of course, you know, when you understand techniques, but it was more probably responding to those kinds of adventure movies that really like take you out of, you go on that ride, and they seem to sort of go further than any other kind of genre because you're there on this mission, you know, with this group of people and these monsters. And it was so, I loved that. And so a lot of my early projects and story books and drawings were like more of the sort of Dungeons and Dragons adventure stuff. I read all those Steve Jackson and Livingstone books. Robin would have them and pass them down to me. And basically around that age of sort of 7 or whatever, I'd be listening to Iron Maiden and reading Steve Jackson and Livingstone books. I remember being in France on a holiday, and the whole sort of summer it felt like I was in Forest of Doom with Peace of Mind on a tape.
So good. What was your first big horror that blew you away then? Because I know like Evil Dead 2 was big for you from an effects point of view, but had you seen much before then?
I would always cite Evil Dead 2 as the movie that changed my life and changed the course of my brain to want to make movies. But before that, there was a handful. I'd seen my close friend from primary school called Christopher. His dad was the first person in our lives who owned a VHS player and had these things called VHSs, which obviously now seems like a strange concept. But back then, you know, you either watched movies around Christmas and looked in the Radio Times to see what the movies were that would be on TV, because there was hardly ever any on TV unless it was sort of late night or whatever, or on VHS. So Christopher's dad, first of all, I remember him, those vivid first experiences. One was with John Borman's Excalibur. Not a horror movie, but super horrific. And that still inspired me to this day for actually the use of blood, because he used blood in that film. Such a kind of canvas, such a vivid... I had never seen like armor being pierced and blood coming out through the cracks like that. That was like an adult swords and sorcery and sex movie. It's a brilliant movie, Excalibur. But and around the same time, I also saw Alien, which was like probably the most queasy, scared and sick I've ever felt watching a movie in my life. Didn't know what Alien was. Again, we sort of sat down, me and Christopher and him, and we must have been probably like 8 or 9, and it was on. And it, you know, that movie still is. I think the mythology and the biology of the xenomorph concept is so terrifying now, but to sort of not really understand it and see that egg open up and it get on John Hurt's face, then being brought back into the ship. What I remember is I didn't make it through the whole movie. I felt so terrified that I kind of told his mum I felt ill and needed to go to bed. She put me to bed in his bedroom, which was a bunk bed. And I remember that he had all these glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. So when they closed the door and it went pitch black, I was just lying there with this fucking ceiling of stars, and all I could think of was this, what I'd seen, this image of this black, weird alien shape, you know, the side of the xenomorph and the mouth.
So you probably made it worse for yourself not seeing the end of the film, because you have no idea what what happened.
Yeah, exactly. It was just like an absolute trauma, that film. And I don't think I saw Alien quite some time, actually. It wasn't like I wanted to see it straight away like a lot of films. So Alien was one that was probably one of the first. Three others. Another one at the same house was Salem's Lot. And that absolutely traumatized me with the kid at the window, scratching on the window. And also because I felt like similar, because I had an older brother, Robin, and I always sort of like knew he'd take care of me and look after me. And so the weird thing in Salem's Lot is that the younger brother gets turned into a vampire and he's scratching at his older brother's window, I think. And that kind of also really disturbed me, the idea that I could be the one that got turned into a monster and a vampire and I'd be like corrupting him. And, you know, they get attacked in the woods together and all that. So Salem's Lot chilled my blood. Same thing. I don't think I saw it for a long time afterwards. And then two others. One was Twilight Zone, the movie.
Brilliant. All these are just stone cold classics.
Absolutely brilliant. I love all these movies now.
Which was your favourite episode out of the Twilight Zone movie? Mine was always the one with the teacher and she takes the little kid back to his house.
Yeah, man, that still gives me the chills. That's partly what I was going to say. It's kind of where I almost wanted to turn it off, was when the rabbit pops up.
It was the girl without the mouth, though, that got me.
Oh, God, yeah. Well, here's the thing. Again, I was with Jamie, my cousin. I had a babysitter. We were lying on his floor. We'd been told to go to bed. We're in sleeping bags. It's always that thing where you sort of turn the TV on to see if there's anything on. Like now, you know what you're going to watch before you watch it, or you've seen a million trailers. But back then, it would just be like, something's on TV and there's two guys driving a car and they're talking. Well, let's just see what it is. And then, you know, you want to see something really scary. When that happened, and that's a great jump scare. It was so it's a sound effect. It just goes like, it was so brutal. Again, I'm like a blank canvas at like Dungeons and Dragons, but seeing that demon zombie thing.
Especially with the build-up as well, which was just dialogue for so long.
It's so chit-chatty, it's so casual. And now you realise, or now I realise as I grow up, these are two of the greatest comedians just, you know, riffing off each other in a car. So the mood is really casual, and the music with Midnight Special playing, which we just played actually a few nights ago with my band. Again, I sort of like, turn it off, we got to turn it off. And Jamie, my older cousin, flicked the channels and then flipped it back onto Twilight Zone. And so then I can't remember the order of the stories now, but the Joe Dante one with the woman taking the kid back to his house. It's a sort of like queasy and sort of surreal, that episode. Yeah, definitely one of those two. I'm just trying to remember them because I get a little bit mixed up with things like Cat's Eye as well.
Yeah, there's the one with, there's the one with the whole story where they actually got killed in real life. The one with the guy who goes back in time with all like the racism stuff and all that kind of thing. Then it's the one with the teacher and the kid. Then it's the one which is the remake of the classic episode where the guy on the plane.
Oh, that's incredible, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, so the gremlin on the plane, I think that one's one of my favourites. I always think of that when I'm on the plane, looking out of the wing, seeing that creature tearing it apart. And then the last movie of the sort of set of four was American Werewolf in London. So I was a little bit older. I think I was 11, gone on this same trip with my mum and dad to Cornwall. This time they stopped off at their friends in a farmhouse in Exmoor. And they had literally a kind of ancient farmhouse in the middle of a moor. And they had a giant sheepdog. And it was just this massive beast. And I remember we played out on the moors like until dusk, playing like hide and seek in the army and stuff. And we were like down in the dust, had a great evening, had some food. Weirdly, had to sleep on the kitchen floor.
A random set.
Stone farmhouse. This was me and my friend Frank. And we had these 80s sleeping bags that were like bright orange and red, I remember. And the same thing, let's put the TV on, see what's on. Two guys walking on a moor chatting. Who'd have known it was the same director? And yeah, just that way in, it sort of lulls you in with this false sense of fun and security. And then when that attack happened and they're sort of, he's like lacerating this bright red coat, I just felt like that was me in the sleeping bag. And I remember thinking, same thing, we probably turned it off and then turned it on to sort of like try and kind of see what we could watch. I don't think we made it through the whole of that. I'd love to say we did, but I have a feeling we probably didn't, because by the time the Nazi attack, I was probably like, this is just fucking too much. But I do remember when we turned the lights out, there's this fucking dog sniffing around the farmhouse outside, this huge dog. There's the moor outside, and I'm lying in this bright red sleeping bag that I've just seen has got no protection whatsoever against the claws of a werewolf.
You were screwed, basically.
But all of these experiences sort of like injected my brain with something that was exciting. When I saw Evil Dead 2, which was when I was 12, with my friend Dave, who's my close collaborator, illustrator, he was like my gateway into horror. I was his gateway into heavy metal. So through Robin always being one step ahead and learning of the bands that were coming out, I would sort of know of those bands and go to school. And me and my friends would sort of walk around the field at lunchtime, and I would talk about heavy metal bands, and Dave would be talking about Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and Psycho 2 and this thing called Evil Dead 2, which I think we'd seen Jonathan Ross did a special, incredibly strange film show special on this film called Evil Dead 2, which had this young guy, Sam Raimi, on it. And it looked amazing.
Had you heard of Evil Dead?
We must have heard of Evil Dead, but that was banned at the time. You couldn't get it. I actually eventually did. There was one way to get it. One way was to go to Camden Market and get one of those 20th generation copies, which I did. And I got Texas Chainsaw Massacre and things like that. But it was like watching it through a kind of like static fuzz. And then the other way was, weirdly, there was one of these first, I guess it was like one of the first sort of Blockbuster / Netflix mail order video companies. Really strangely, it had access to some of the banned videos. And this was probably when I was about 15. So this is probably about 1990. So I didn't see Evil Dead before Evil Dead 2. Did you?
Evil Dead and Evil Speak was like one of the first films I ever saw on video. So it must have been right at that cusp before they took them off the shelves.
All right. Wow. Wow, you were ahead of me. But Evil Dead 2, obviously Evil Dead 2 is basically a sort of moderately higher budgeted version of Evil Dead. But I remember that because I have a feeling we either bunked off school, which I never did. But it was like this one day where, just talking about VHSs and videos and the sort of joy of renting out a video a film you've been waiting for. Dave got me into horror. Dave got me into Fangoria. We would sort of make these pilgrimages up from where we live in East Sussex, down in Lewes, up to London to go to the Virgin Megastore that was one of the only places that sold Fangoria and Gore Zone.
Same here. We had to go to like the Virgin in Nottingham, and it always used to seem a bit dingy back then. The Virgin did. They had like the lower downstairs where they had all the magazines and posters and stuff. It always seemed a bit grubby. I used to love it.
I used to save up. We would do paper rounds, and I'd basically save up all our money for this bi-monthly trip up to London where we'd put all our money and we'd go up on the train and get a burger, and we'd go to Virgin and buy Fangorias and VHS tapes that had big cases. Do you know what I mean? Like the big cases that were the ones that were a bit more expensive. I remember buying Bad Taste, for instance. And I'd come back with like, this is what I've earned from doing this paper round for the last 3 months.
I wonder how many copies Virgin used to have of it. Because, I mean, that'd have been a nightmare if you went up there and they'd sold out. Like, shit, I've come all this way.
I know you've got your amazing video store kind of gallery museum. I've got about 1,000 VHS tapes that I've never wanted to throw away.
Now, keep hold of them, mate. It's treasure, that is.
But so we would sort of plan on the movie we were going to get out, because Dave's parents, unlike mine, my parents have been very supportive of us in our artistic endeavors, but they were also, I think when they found a copy of Nightmare on Elm Street, they sort of banned horror movies that were 18s, understandably maybe, until I was old enough, but Dave didn't. So we'd go to Dave's, and then, we'd plan on what it was, and it was going to be Evil Dead 2. There was 3 video shops that we had the choice of, like kind of like tiny little corner shop one. There was like a service station garage and a slightly more bigger video shop. And Evil Dead 2 came in, and it was like, we've got that film. And we sort of bunked off school, and we were at his parents' house with all the curtains drawn, putting it on for the first time. And I mean, it was just like from the start, I think the film's 87 minutes and it just doesn't let up. But it was this balance of horror and humor that virtually never gets done like that and done right, and both taken to kind of extremes. By the time I had finished, I was sort of like, I didn't think I want to make a film, but we as a little group of friends and lovers of heavy metal and horror used to make our own movies on Super 8, then VHS. So that immediately everything became about replicating what we'd seen in Evil Dead 2.
I mean, and if you've been like reading Fangoria as well, I mean, that shone light on a lot of the techniques, and it kind of made the effects guys rock stars as well, because you knew about them rather than just like the stars of the film. So did that ever like give you an early confidence that it could be a career, or you just wanted to have a go at it?
100% was the intention of the career, really up until after I'd left my degree at Wimbledon School of Art in 2003, actually. So once I found out that it was possible to have a job making monsters, sculpting, mold making, creating prosthetics, designing animatronics, and bringing monsters to life on screen, which, like I said, had been inspired by seeing the Ray Harryhausen Harryhausen movies and understanding at some point that we're watching a mixture of techniques and animation and large scale stuff as well. That was what I wanted to do. And still kind of do and did do, because it was coming out of Fangoria and these American publications and a lot of the American movies and the sort of bigger scale. It seemed like the only way to do that would be to be in America. So I was like really kind of confused, age 12 to sort of 18, not knowing how I could get to do that. And then gradually finding out, about companies that I got work experience at in England, and eventually doing this course in special effects at Wimbledon School of Art.
Who were your guys? Who were the ones who you looked up to?
Kevin Yeager, Rob Bottin, Rick Baker, Stan Winston, Alec Gillis, Tom Woodruff, Tom Savini, Greg Canham, and Dick Smith, of course.
Have you met any of them?
I've met quite a few of them now, and they're all my idols, because like you said, we sort of grew up reading about them. You'd see photos of them, and they were in that period, so they did look like rock stars. And yeah, no, I've worked with some of them too, and it's kind of almost strange doing calls about a movie that I'm going to make and still approaching some of these guys who are kind of my heroes. When I went to this amazing festival in Spain, it was for the Hallow in 2015, and I got out of the taxi with my bags, and I'm like, that's Rick Baker. And there was Rick Baker with his wife, and he was there as a special guest to do a talk. And I collared him and said, look, I've just made my first film called The Hallow, and it's kind of an ode to practical effects. And I've got to always have a little book which shows the making of it. And I kind of showed him that. And he was really kind, and he immediately gave me his contacts and said to send him it. So I did, and he watched it and really sent really nice notes straight back about congratulations, and you're one of the monster kids.
Oh, so cool. What were your early cinema experiences? Did you see Shocker at the cinema?
How do you know that? I mean, same thing, yeah. When it got to going to the cinema, it was obviously harder to see the movies that we were dying to see. And it was always me and Dave and Robin. And there was a cinema in Brighton at the Odeon that we would go to after school. And basically we had a sort of technique where Robin would pick us up from school. We'd dress in our most adult costume. We'd wear cowboy hats, cowboy boots to make us a bit taller. And we'd change in the car, and then he'd go in ahead of us, buy 3 tickets. And then we'd go into the toilets, and it was really nerve-wracking because we were sure we'd get found out. And we'd sort of lock ourselves in the loos and hang out for a bit, and then Robin would come out like a sort of weird shifty drug dealer and deal us the tickets. And then we'd have to prepare ourselves, walk up to the usher to go in, and then talk in the lowest voice that normally, for some reason, I'd throw in an American accent or something strange. And Shocker was the ultimate. That was the first 18 I saw at the cinema. I remember the thrill of getting past that usher and knowing that we'd done something wrong, criminal here. We went in the cinema, sat in the middle, and it wasn't very many people. And I just remember thinking, they're going to come in a minute. They're going to shine their spotlight on us and tell us to get out, because it's clear, we're in an 18 now, And then the movie started, Dimension Films and Wes Craven and everything, and we were watching it. I was like, "Oh my god, we're actually watching it!" and that was a great. I love that film as well.
The soundtrack's great to that as well. Was you full on hard rock, heavy metal fan by that point?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's one of those. They don't do it so much now, where they get a load of bands together of the era and kind of cover other bands' songs. Like Judgment Night was an amazing one as well. Judgment Night, Shocker, obviously The Crow, one of the greatest. What's that one called? That Tom McFarlane, Spawn, that was another one.
Oh, yeah.
Better soundtrack than movie, but yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. Did you get to see Robin play much?
Yeah, all the time. Always tried to go. I've been on tour with him back in the early days of Ragdolls. Before that, with Hang 'em High. I think we went to see Hang 'em High in Brighton. Famously, my cousin didn't get in. He wasn't old enough. I think we were 12 or something.
What were some of your other favourite rock shows when you got heavily into bands? I heard you on Adam Green and Joe Lynch's podcast. You saw the Skid Row, LA Guns and Love 8 tour.
Going back, weirdly, I think the first rock gig that we went to was Magnum at Wembley Arena. I think that was the first. And then we went to Donington. It was when Whitesnake played. So it was Whitesnake, Aerosmith, Poison, Choir Boys, Thunder. Yeah.
That's one I kicked myself for not going to. Just as I was really getting into music. My first one was the year after with AC/DC.
Yeah. That was the first one. And that was also the first time we went to a festival. So it was quite whoa, shit, there's a lot of people.
Who'd you go to that with? Was there a bunch of you?
Me and Dave and Wayne, who was the other kind of major rocker in our school year. And I think it might have been possibly my cousin if Matthew came. I think it was me, Dave, and Wayne.
Who was you there to see? Who was your band of that day?
We would have definitely been at that point, Poison would have been one of the main reasons to go. And it was Flesh and Blood tour and Aerosmith and Choir Boys. I was more Choir Boys than Thunder. Then we would go to as many of the rock gigs that came, particularly a lot of those American bands, hair metal bands, glam rock bands, like Love Hate, sort of at the Marquee, bands like Bang Tango, Enough's Enough, Poison, Motley Crue. We went to the Four Skins show at the Marquee when Motley Crue played as the Four Skins.
Oh, nice. Was that before Donington the following year?
Yeah, it was Decade of Decadence.
Yeah, I think that was their secret warm-up show, wasn't it?
That's right. Oh, it's amazing. Oh, I fainted at it. I'm coming across as a real lightweight, and horror films terrify me, and I fainted at a rock gig. Robin got me and Dave in. Somehow he got 3 tickets for that, and we went in and probably got in at like 7 o'clock, and I don't think Motley Crue came on till about 11 p.m. So we had been standing in the marquee, packed. And then when they finally came on, everyone crushed forwards and we all went in, and I suddenly was like, I'm lightheaded and passed out. Robin had to pull me back out. But yeah, that was a very special one. I think Dave got Tommy Lee's stick as well.
Oh, amazing. Did grunge and the alternative stuff of the 90s have a big effect on you, or was you at the right age to kind of just embrace it all? It was all still cool for you?
I remember really vividly, we were at art school, we were at Brighton doing A-levels. I was sort of 16, 17. And there was a guy there who I kind of looked up to, who was like a bit older than me, who had like the perfect look, and he knew every band, he knew everything about music. He had cool hair, and he had asked me to paint his boots because I did a lot of leather jacket painting, and I painted Kiss on his boots, and I just finished painting them and giving them to him. And then he kind of goes, oh, there's a new band coming. It's going to change things or something. And I'm like, what is it? And he got a tape and put it in and listened to it. And it was Teen Spirit. And I was sort of just like, oh, what is this? It's fucking different. And, I can't say I don't like it, but the fuck is it? That doesn't sound like anything I've ever heard before.
I was the same. I was like, this is like nothing I've listened to. It's not what I listen to, but there's something about it.
Literally, or it may not have been exactly, but in my head, I remember it was like the next day that guy came in and he'd cut all his hair. He was wearing a baggy, like, string top. He wasn't wearing his cowboy boots anymore. He had some fucked up DMs. It was like a real, change. And it definitely took me and my friends a lot of time to process, I think. And a lot of those bands that then overnight went down or tried to keep up and did their own grunge albums, like Warrant or Bang Tango and stuff like that. And I guess the ones that were great are still great. It's like the same with all genres, isn't it? It was kind of like a bit traumatizing at the time because our whole rock world and community was sort of like shattered, and you had to sort of decide what you liked. But ultimately I like good music.
It was tough though in like a pre-internet world though. I mean, a lot of those bands that we love, they loved all the other bands. Poison took Alice in Chains out on tour with them and all that kind of thing. But because it was pre-internet and how the way media and MTV looked at it, they literally just shut the door on everything they'd been covering beforehand. So we had no way of finding out what all our favourite bands were doing. There was room for everybody, but just the way the media handled it, we had no way of keeping up with it all. It was so strange. Now you'd be able to follow everybody and everybody could carry on doing their own thing. But back then it was, like you say, overnight just wiped the floor with everyone. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Those early projects you started around 12 and stuff like that, what kind of stuff was you using to build your effects? Was you just finding anything in the cabinets?
I think from the kind of early special effects guides that you'd have in Fangoria. Fangoria would do like a Bloody Best occasionally and have a makeup guide. Then I got Tom Savini's Grand Illusions, and I had various sort of makeup books through my parents and costume contacts and things. So it was a combination of sort of makeup guides and books and Fangoria's breakdowns. And it obviously came down to latex and alginate and plaster. To begin with, we'd go and buy those little liquid latex bottles that you could get in makeup shops and experiment, with tissue paper and toilet roll and earbuds and latex and wax and mixing up flour and water and ketchup.
Any backfires if you tried it on your mates? Any reactions?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we'd try and create creatures. We'd do some basic sort of puppetry or animatronics and stuff, and using bicycle cables and things like that and tentacles. And then also doing a lot of early experimental prosthetics. I did sort of latex someone's eyes closed once and also removed most of their eyebrows by kind of pouring latex directly onto the face, which I realized you weren't really meant to do. And then at art school, I did a full face mold with the teacher's supervision, but not kind of, now looking back, it was quite dangerous, but the guy's fine. But I think he took his eyebrows off because I'm basically mixing a hard plaster and pasting it onto his face without using alginate. Which, when I was in Manchester, Rhys Shearsmith did a talk. He did a kind of an intro to the thing. and he was talking with Mick Garris. And actually, a lot of his childhood experiences and trajectory was almost exactly the same as mine. He had a similar thing where he was talking about basically pouring hot plaster onto someone's face to do a life cast or something like that.
What were some of the early projects you did? Does any like footage still survive? Have you transferred them onto DVD or hard drive?
Yeah.
Was there one called Pentagram?
Yeah, Pentagram was like the zenith, the sort of the peak. Before Pentagram was like a VHS movie, whereas two of our best friends, Mike and Joe, who also lived in Lewis, they had their mum and dad's Super 8 camera. So initially we would get together and we would sort of save up for 2 rolls of Super 8, which combined with the processing would be quite a lot of money, and you'd have to, the paper round cash was sort of split. Before VHS, we made a movie called The Chiddingly Chainsaw Massacre, and that was, I think, probably like maybe 4 rolls of 2.5 minutes, so it was sort of maybe total about 7 minutes or something, and it was the most extravagant production at the time. I mean, all of the stories were similar. It was normally like a group of teenagers going camping or hanging out and then getting set upon or unleashing a demonic spirit or a supernatural killer that normally when he killed you, turned you into a zombie that you then had to come back and be killed again. But they were a kind of a merge of Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Evil Dead, sort of slasher movies. The plot wasn't really a plot. It was just how many cool effects can we put on screen? And that was the thrill. It was like watching the movies, seeing kind of how they'd achieved some of these effects and then trying to mimic them, create our own illusions, and then putting them on screen and being able to watch them back, show our families and friends. And they were silent because they were Super 8, so we'd also play records to soundtrack them, or we'd like have a slow motion button that we'd literally project them at that early time. And then when suddenly we found out you could rent this thing called a Ferguson Video Star, which was the first sort of VHS in the sort of audiovisual shop near us. So it was like, guys, we can rent a VHS for the weekend. I think it was like 50 quid for a weekend. So we all put in like 6 quid and got a tape. But then it was like, guess what? You don't have to shoot in just 2.5 minutes. You know, this is like a 90-minute tape. So although Pentagram is sort of the most ambitious, it's an 18-minute movie. You can see our training in shooting things in camera was helpful, you know, and it's still in a weird way is for me now, because we used to literally shoot in little bursts of 2.5 seconds or whatever and shoot chronologically and shoot in order. And it was basically like you get that competition called Straight 8. It was pretty much like that, but with lots of horror gags and beheadings and blood squirts and all that, which is hard to time. Whereas Pentagram was sort of like, we then had an unlimited amount of time we could shoot, which meant that our bad acting was just like magnified and our bad dialogue was magnified. But Pentagram was kind of our shocker in a way, because it was a group of heavy metal loving kids going camping, and they have a talk around a campfire, and they find out that 16 years before, for some reason it was 16 years, a psychopathic killer had stalked the area, and he was shot in the nearby pond. Robin played the kind of glam rock super cop.
Glam rock super cop, yeah. That's great.
Again, we shot it chronologically. So we shot the cold open flashback of Robin arresting and shooting this Satan worshipping sort of Horace Pinker like. I put a bald cap on Dave and he carved a pentagram in his head while sitting in a pentagram of candles, which is pretty hardcore. And we had like smoke effects and stuff like that. Yeah, he gets chased to the nearby pond at night. So we did like a night shoot. We had like our kind of standard lights on flexes, holding them out over the pond at night and stuff. And he had to dive in the pond at night. And so it was all pretty full on. We did our own stunts. Robin and Dave had to dive into the pond at night. I'd be filming that. So we shot that like the night before all our friends turned up to do the next weekend of shooting. This was our ultimate kind of lifestyle was, you know, they'd pitch tents in our field, and then we'd say, this is the movie that we're going to make. And we had a kind of sort of a script, but more like a storyboard plan of effects with some scenes in there. And yeah, they then recount the story around the campfire in terrible, terrible dialogue. And then they raise the spirit of, his name was Vorga, which was basically Voorhees and Kruger put together.
Yes.
And he looked like Pinker. So yeah, he comes back shockingly to the sound of Night Songs by Cinderella.
It gets better.
Yeah, man. I did an animated title saying Pentagram with the score of Hellraiser. And actually, what was amazing on the VHS, and later I got this sort of high 8 camera, it had 2 channels. So you could record the in-camera sound, and then you had one chance to add a soundtrack, which was like the ultimate thing for me, because this was obviously before computers and that. So then we could record dialogue, but then I could do sound effects, but I'd do it in real time. We'd sit with a record player playing records into the room, and then I'd also have a chance to do sound effects. we'd have like all these sound effects making things, fruit and, pillows to hit and walnuts to kind of crack.
Was there more work went into that than there is nowadays?
Don't know about that, but we'd have to do it at the same time.
Yeah.
And then we'd be really terribly redubbing our own voices, sometimes in American inexplicably. So yeah, some of the soundtracks to that movie, I don't think I could show Pentagram anywhere other than in person, because it would probably cost all the license fees, because it's got like Skid Row and Ozzy Osbourne and stuff like that on it. But yeah, he comes back from the dead and he proceeds to work his way through killing off the teenagers, but everyone that dies comes back as a zombie. And the two heroes who go off to get pizza at the beginning of the movie, in a dramatic twist, come back to find their friends are all zombies that they now have to kill themselves.
So good. Does still survive somewhere though.
You know what? It is a movie that kind of formed us, and we're all still very close friends, and we play in a band together. We have a kind of an annual rewatch of Pentagram. We actually watched it in the pandemic as a way of connecting and remembering each other. For one of our 30th birthdays, I projected all of those Super 8s and Pentagram and put them all on a DVD. So it does exist, but it probably sounds a lot better than they are. It was what we loved to do, and it was like the ultimate feeling to then have a movie at the end that, at the very least, still causes people to kind of, like go, oh, I can't believe you did that. There's a bit when I hack up my friend. I'm using an axe, and it's inspired by what Ash does in Evil Dead when he's hacking towards the camera and there's this blood flying up in his hands in front of the camera. We would do stuff like that. I set to Alice Cooper's Chop, Chop, Chop. My friend Mike kind of stops me at the end. He goes, Max, that's enough. I was called Max. I always like to be called Max for no reason. He goes, Jesus, this is turning into something like Evil Dead.
Obviously, Robin just dived into the whole music stuff, going from band to band and stuff. And you started making music videos for him. You did stuff for Anti-Product, I believe, and Rachel Stamp.
Yeah.
How was that experience for you, being a music fan, seeing your brother getting success in these bands and then you getting the chance to do the videos for him? Was that a lot of fun?
Yeah, it was. It was like the first proper step into... The first ones weren't, I wouldn't call them professional, but it was having a kind of proper tiny budget and working for people, trying to think. I mean, I'd done a number of my own short films. Aside from our kind of teenage horror movies, I'd started doing some short films and stuff at art college, and became aware of music videos and MTV, obviously, and seeing Robin work his way through, the music industry and be in bands and see him play gigs and record, particularly in Rachel Stamp. I was always a big fan of bands he's been in. The first video I did actually was for Goldblade. I did a video for 16 Tons, and that came through a really good guy, Phil Richardson, who took me under his wing and me and Robin were in a video for the Wild Hearts' song Anthem, and we just got told to turn up, and I dressed in a sort of Spider-Man costume, and you had to sing the chorus, I'm in love with the rock and roll world, in front of a psych. We just said, should we have a fight? And so we did a kind of fake punch up. And you can see that if you watch that video, you'll see us in it briefly, me throwing a punch as if he's punched him over. And the director was Phil Richardson, and he was just a music video director and an editor. And at that time, I was just trying to get experience in the industry and anything. And I always have a portfolio that I used to carry around with all my sculptures and creatures and animations and stuff like that. And I met Phil afterwards and sort of showed him my work. And he just very sweetly just said, look, if there's anything I can do to help you, I will. And he did. He invited me up to his edit suite, and I went and hung out there and watched him edit the Wild Hearts video and other videos, and he taught me how to use editing and equipment. And then he got asked to do this Goldblade video, and he kindly sort of put it my way and said Corin should do it. And that was my first one, and it was really diving into the unknown. And me and a group of sort of friends under Phil, I put it together and storyboarded it and shot it and edited it, and then did a bunch of others. Worked on the Yo-Yo's Sunshine Girl Anti-Product bungee jumping. I cut from the load of footage that they had being on tour, and then really wanted to do something for Robin's band, Rachel Stamp, Did I Want to Be Your Doll? That was actually all shot on my 16mm Bolex wind-up camera, and it was quite elaborate. I wanted to sort of do something Hammer horror looking and gothic. We shot it at a house down where I live. Got a friend of mine who had this incredible convertible car, made puppets. It's still, in a way, everything in that video is sort of in a lot of my work now.
How is it for you, like, as a horror fan and a music fan? You finally got to make the Hallow in 2015. How is it for you to get acknowledged in the horror community, but also Slash from Guns N' Roses became a fan of it as well? It's like all the pieces dropping together. That must have been really, really cool.
Yeah, there's been some really lovely crossovers as you get older. I can only equate it to, if you keep doing exactly what you love, you naturally are going to kind of bump into people who are still alive, who have been following their paths and doing similar things, whether it's like, friends you meet at film festivals, or sometimes you come across someone you idolize, it feels a shock to find out they're into similar stuff. But, Slash is a massive horror fan and a particular love of 70s and 80s movies. And actually, when I was at Sundance with the Hallow, I was told he was there and he was going to come to my screening, which was like, what? Slash is coming. He sat behind the producer and he was sort of like, we could hear how much he was enjoying it. Apparently he loved the drums on the soundtrack, and that was cool. Robin played him. And so I said, I'd love to meet him afterwards. And he was just really sweet. We met afterwards and he was just very precise, actually very particular on the things that he likes to see in movies that were exactly the things which I'd been going for, to do with practical effects and a kind of look to a movie and the balance of the sort of horror and the mythology and the sort of 70s aesthetic that I was trying to put in the Hallow, because the Hallow was kind of inspired by a lot of my favorite movies, from Alien to The Thing to sort of Straw Dogs to Evil Dead. And he'd recognized that, and we've remained in touch since, and that's been amazing. And then Tim Armstrong from Rancid he came to see The Nun and was a huge fan and loves old school horror. And I did a podcast for the Boo Crew in LA and for The Nun, and Tim Armstrong was on it, and I ended up doing a song with him live on air, which was a song I'd written for Damien Bashir and Taisa Farmiga as a sort of rap gift, called The Convent Blues. And I'd never played it other than to them in Romania. And I think I just thought, if I'm going to spend an hour on a podcast with another of my idols, Tim Armstrong, it would be nice to do something different. Suddenly I found myself singing The Convent Blues with Tim Armstrong. And, he's a great, incredible, prolific guy.
So good. I mean, I know getting the chance to do the Prodigy video was a big deal for you, but if you could do anything for like an 80s band music video, is there anybody who'd jump to mind?
I mean, with the Prodigy, that's one of my favorite videos I've done. And same thing, getting to meet Liam and actually find out was quite similar. And, in terms of, again, the sort of what you love to see in a horror movie. He's a big horror movie fan as well. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I put a key Prodigy track in episode 7 of Gangs of London. One of my favorite bits. Yeah, wait till you see that. Man, what would it be? I mean, I have a number of sort of good connections and relationships now with some of those bands, and always wanted to make a Maiden video. And I guess it would be a band that has the sort of visual capacity. I never wanted to just do a performance video. I mean, it'd be nice to just do an absolutely mental video for, Motley Crue or something like that. But it would also be cool to do. I'd love to do a video for Nine Inch Nails or Nick Cave. Do you know what I mean?
Corin, I'll let you go, mate. But it's been lovely to chat with you. I appreciate your time.
I know it's been a long time coming. Maybe we can do a follow-up at some point, because I think we've just touched the surface.
It's been a blast. What's next for you? Have you got anything next year that you can announce or anything?
Yeah. I've got a number of projects in film and TV, and a lot of good horror with a lot of good monsters. And you have to wait till next year to find out. But yeah, looking forward to next year. Merry Christmas, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Huge thanks to Corin Hardy for making some time in his hectic schedule to sit down and chat with me on the last Straight to Video podcast of 2022. That was a real treat for me, and I truly hope we can do the part 2 which Corin hinted at, as there's so much more I'd love to learn. Make sure to check out Gangs of London on Sky TV, and also deep dive into Corin's other work, from The Hallow and The Nun through to all his music videos, and also his incredible short film Butterfly, which he did way back in 2003. Everything you need to know can be found at corinhardy.com. So that is it for this year on the podcast. It's been a super eventful year for sure, and I want to thank everyone for continuing to listen, and a massive shout out to those that support the show through Patreon, as that is a real lifeline to this podcast. I've continued to post a few updates on there before the main show returns in January, so if you'd like to keep up to date, check out patreon.com/STVpod. And also thank you to everyone who's been so positive about our 80s video shop in Alfreton, Derbyshire. Who'd have thought that in 2022 we'd be opening up our own actual video shop? Chris and I have some great ideas planned for next year and some super cool events in store, so please find us at 80s Video Shop all over social media and at our website www.80svideoshop.co.uk. I sincerely hope you all have an amazing Christmas and New Year. Thanks so much for sticking with us, and I promise some great stuff in 2023. So till we chat again, take care and speak soon.